Okay, so we're up to way number 25, which is Kabbalas HaYisurin, accepting pain. So, if someone asks you what the opposite of pain is, most people would answer pleasure. But the true answer is that that's not correct. The opposite of pain is the lack of pain, is comfort. And confusing comfort with pleasure leads to a life of decadence. It basically leads to a life filled with escaping the pain of trying to move forward, of living. So pain is the price we pay for lasting real pleasure. No pain, no gain, right? That's what Kabbalas HaYisurin means, that to build a loving marriage, to succeed in a career, to learn Torah, perfect your character, all these things require a level of pain in order to reach the goal that you have. The pursuit of comfort leads to kind of the Peter Pan syndrome, where people don't bother to grow up. They prefer to live a carefree, responsibility-free life. So rather than debating whether to have a large family or a small family, they choose to have no family at all, which has no responsibilities associated with it, right? So they don't realize that while they're sparing themselves a not insignificant amount of pain, they're also eliminating their chance at having the greatest, deepest levels of pleasure available to them. So this kind of decadence, says Reb Noach, is what contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire, right? After building these incredible armies and legions and the like, and conquering half the known universe, they got complacent. They said, you know what, I don't want to go out to the army, I want to live a life of comfort. So instead they hired mercenaries, and as the story goes, those mercenaries then turned on them and toppled the Roman Empire. So one of this is pain is the price of pleasure. So real pleasure is inseparable from pain. For instance, if you were to ask your parents what their greatest source of pleasure in life is, they would probably say you, their child. Then ask them, what's your greatest source of pain in life? You get the picture, right? Same answer, because the greater the pleasure, the greater the effort that's required to attain it. Reaching the summit of a mountain, right, requires a tremendous, tremendous amount of effort. And you feel gratified when you get there, and you're exuberant and you're exultant at the accomplishment of reaching the summit. Very different if you took a helicopter ride to the summit. You may appreciate the beauty of it, but you don't get that degree of fulfillment. So our sages tell us, Lefum Tsara Agra, according to the measure of pain and effort that you input, that's the measure of reward that you get out of it. So a businessman who started with nothing and toils and gets to the top of the ladder and builds himself up can't stop regaling people, or doesn't enjoy anything more than regaling people with tales of his lowly start and the climb. Whereas their child, who's inheriting the fortune, right, doesn't really understand why it is that they're so focused on everything they went through to get to the top. So this is certainly true of Torah study, right? When we're learning something, the more effort and energy that we have to put into it, the greater our ability to conquer and then retain what it is that we're learning. So two of this is recognize that there's no running away from it. It's an illusion to think that you can run away from pain. You can avoid the pain of not studying for a final exam, right? But then you're stuck with the pain of failure. So during tough situations, remember, pain is passing, results are lasting. Okay, so sometimes, B of this is that sometimes the fear of pain stops us in our tracks. So what happens when you take a 5-year-old to get a flu shot, right? As soon as the doctor shows the child the needle, the child wigs out, and now you need 3 nurses to hold the child down to give him a shot that's over in a millisecond. And imagine an alternative scenario where the child is distracted by a toy or a video or whatever it is. The doctor comes in, gives a shot, it's over before the child even notices, and there's no... So in many instances, the fear of the pain is actually significantly greater than the pain itself. And recognizing that helps us avoid getting paralyzed by our fear. So how do we avoid that in a more proactive way? So make a list of some of the things that you'd like to do if you weren't so afraid to try it. Right now, articulate what you're fearful of. right? So for instance, if someone asked you to speak at a major event, a class reunion, and you're terrified of getting up in public, so ask yourself, what am I terrified about? What's the worst thing that could happen? Right? Well, they'll be bored. Well, they're not going to throw tomatoes at you, right? They're not going to boo you off the stage. Chances are, very few people will be listening to you to begin with. So all of a sudden, that fear level begins to drop, and you can actually take action. So 3 of this is the fear of reality. Recognize that one of the greatest fears that we have is the fear of facing up to life's challenges and conflicts. People would rather live in denial than wake up to reality. Why? Because looking at reality, looking at the facts, often requires us to change. And change is something that we are more afraid of than anything else. So when we encounter threatening information, our knee-jerk response is to put a protective shell around ourselves to deflect that information. In psychological parlance, this is called cognitive dissonance. Right? We need to resist the desire to shield ourselves from the facts, no matter how much they mess with our equilibrium. Right? There's a concept in one of the famous business structures called constructive equilibrium, disequilibrium, right? Meaning constructive shaking up of the current reality. Because if you bury your heads in the sand, ultimately when you face reality, it'll hurt a lot more, and oftentimes it'll be too late to do anything about it. Number 4 of this is to keep your eye on the ball. One of the best ways to get rid of the pain is to focus on the pleasure. Example, you have a team playing basketball and they're running up and down the court, exerting maximum human effort to score, to take on their opponent, right? And yeah, there's definitely pain in that effort, but there's almost no focus. They almost don't realize that they're in tremendous pain. Now, a thought exercise. Imagine you walked over to that same team and said, okay, I want you to do exactly what you were doing, but give me the ball. Right? Now they're running up and down the court, attempting to maximize that, to put out that maximum effort, but they don't have the ball to focus on. Right? Within minutes, they're going to be struggling to keep their minds off the exertion, off the pain. Right? Their total focus is now on that pain. You give them back the ball, they'll play easily for another hour. So in life, we need to learn to keep our eye on the ball, to focus on the pleasure and not the pain. Focusing on the pain is guaranteed to fill your life with misery. So learn to focus on the goodness amid the pain, and you'll discover the maximum pleasure that life can offer. So some applied wisdom ideas: make a list of some things that you're afraid of, scrutinize the list, and apply reason to the fears. And ask yourself, is this logical? Is this really what I've made it out to be in my head? And then a second thing to look at for applied wisdom is look at some part of your day and ask yourself where you confuse comfort with pleasure, right? And how does this confusion ultimately rob you of real pleasure, right? Great examples that we can all think of: the staying in bed, the vegging on the couch, right? Where we're looking at that comfort and we're equating it with pleasure, where if we were more proactive, there's something way more pleasurable for us on the other side.